Welcome to Legal English Lab. Today we're talking about corruption, how it threatens democracy, weakens public trust, and distorts markets. But how do the US and EU fight it? Let's compare their approaches and see what works, and what does not. Let's look at three key terms. Bribery means offering money or gifts to influence a public official's decision. Transparency means openness in government, so people can see and understand what's happening. And public trust is the belief that officials act with honesty and integrity. These concepts are essential in the fight against corruption. Remember, corruption erodes democracy and public trust. Independent bodies help detect and prevent bribery. Transparency is essential for good governance, and public trust depends on accountability. In the U.S., there's no single anti-corruption agency. Instead, different offices share the job. The FBI investigates bribery and abuse of power. The Department of Justice brings corruption cases to court. And the Office of Government Ethics checks for conflict of interest. Federal and state systems work side by side. Now let's see how corruption concerns can show up in real life. Here's one example. Qatar gave a fancy Boeing jet to the U.S. while Trump has been the president, right when Qatar was trying to get a big weapons deal. That looks suspicious. Some say it was a gift to get a $20 billion agreement. U.S. taxpayers paid to upgrade the plane, and now Trump wants it back for himself. So the big questions are, was this foreign bribery? And can taking such gifts harm public trust? But it's not just about gifts and jets. Another big concern is what happens when government officials ignore the law itself. Between 2017 and 2021, Trump's team didn't follow at least 57 out of 165 court orders. That's about 1 in 3. When leaders ignore court rulings, it weakens the rule of law and shows a lack of respect for the justice system. That is a serious problem in any democracy. Ignoring court orders shows how the system can break down. That's why anti-corruption laws matter. But in the U.S., there's no clear anti-oligarch law. The rules are spread across different laws, and that makes enforcement weak. Without clear limits on money and power, real change is hard. But while the U.S. lacks clear anti-oligarch laws, it's actually one of the best when it comes to whistleblower protection. People who report fraud or abuse in government are protected by strong federal laws. They don't have to fear being punished, and in some cases, they can even get financial rewards. Independent bodies like the Office of Special Counsel help make sure these protections work. Now, let's turn to the European Union. It follows a different approach, with its own system of institutions and rules to deal with corruption. In the EU, several bodies work together. OLAF, the European Anti-Fraud Office, checks how EU money is spent and investigates fraud. EPPO, the European Public Prosecutor's Office, can bring criminal charges in cross-border cases. And GRECO, the Group of States Against Corruption, helps countries follow anti-corruption standards. It's a shared system, with EU and national levels working side by side. At the same time, each EU country has its own laws and institutions to fight corruption. There's no single model. Every state builds its own system based on national needs and legal traditions, but they all follow common EU rules and cooperate through shared mechanisms. But even with different systems, both the EU and the US face similar challenges. Prosecutors can face political pressure. Enforcement often lacks enough funding, and it's especially hard to stop corruption that crosses borders. Let's look at a few examples. In Hungary and Bulgaria, courts are seen as not fully independent, which weakens justice. And in the U.S., lobbying loopholes make it hard to know who's really influencing decisions. These problems show that writing laws isn't enough. Enforcing them is just as hard. Laws and institutions are important, but they're not enough. Civil society and international organizations also play a big role in fighting corruption. Watchdog groups like Transparency International, GRECO, and the OECD keep an eye on governments and push for change. Investigative journalists uncover scandals and hold leaders accountable. And whistleblowers, people who speak up when they see wrongdoing, can make a huge difference. To support whistleblowers, the EU adopted a special law, the Whistleblower Protection Directive. It protects people in both public and private sectors. Reports can be made confidentially, even anonymously. Large organizations must set up clear channels to report problems. And it's illegal to punish whistleblowers for speaking up. But not all EU countries have fully put these rules into practice yet. Good laws aren't enough. We also need smart policies. That's where scientific advisory bodies come in. These expert groups study what works, give advice to governments, and check if anti-corruption strategies actually make a difference. They also help align national laws with international standards. When knowledge is combined with strong oversight, policies get better and corruption gets harder. Research also plays a big role in fighting corruption. Think tanks and research centers write reports that help shape new laws. They study what works, what doesn't, and where the weak spots are. This kind of evidence helps governments make smarter decisions. Experts don't just write reports. They also advise governments and EU institutions. They help shape new laws and anti-corruption strategies. Many work with the European Commission, special advisory groups, or national agencies. These networks also help countries share ideas and learn from each other, especially with support from groups like the OECD or GRECO. Not all EU countries have a separate anti-corruption agency. In Germany, the work is shared between prosecutors, police, and integrity officers. In Bulgaria, a new commission was set up, but it's been criticized for political bias. What is an anti-corruption court? It's a special court that handles serious corruption cases involving judges, ministers, or MPs. The goal is to ensure fair and independent justice, especially when regular courts might be biased. Some countries have special anti-corruption courts, like Ukraine, the Philippines, or parts of Nigeria. But interestingly, neither the European Union nor the United States has separate courts just for corruption cases. Instead, they rely on regular courts and strong prosecutors to handle high-level corruption. Some countries fight corruption through their regular courts. In Germany and France, there are no separate courts, just special units or regular judges. In Romania, appeals courts handle top-level cases. And in the U.S., corruption is tried in federal courts after investigations by the FBI or Department of Justice. Some EU countries have special anti-corruption prosecutors. For example, Romania has the DNA and Croatia has USKOK. Slovakia also has a special prosecutor's office. In Bulgaria, until 2023, prosecution was linked to the Anti-Corruption Commission, but it faced criticism over independence. Other countries rely on their general prosecution system. The EU Acquis Communautaire, that's the body of EU laws, doesn't demand one fixed anti-corruption model. Each country can decide how to build its own system, as long as it's independent, effective, and in line with EU values. That's why countries like Bulgaria, even with challenges, stay in the process. The focus is on reform and alignment, not punishment. So, what can we conclude? No system is perfect. Every country faces its own challenges. But what really matters is independence, transparency, and strong enforcement. The EU is moving forward with tools like EPPO, while the US has power but a more fragmented system. And wherever we look, one thing is clear. Strong institutions plus active civil society lead to better results in the fight against corruption. Now phrases to remember. Zero tolerance for corruption. No one is above the law. And always follow the money. Don't forget to subscribe for more.